Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Academy. My name is Jeff Pinkman. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the art of off-speed pitches. And what we're going to do is talk a bit about the changeup, talk about the cutter, talk about the curveball, talk about grips, frequency, axis, velocity, and all that. And but before we get to it, I want to ask a little bit from you first. I want you to check us out on Twitter at pinkmanbaseball.com or at pinkmanbaseball. You can check us out at our website at pinkmanbaseball.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and anytime that you have an opportunity, if you like something, you can also tap the screen and give us those hearts to kind of bump up our rating a little bit. But I want to share a little bit about a lesson that I had this morning, and it was about a player who we were talking about changeups, and he didn't have any idea of how to throw one or when to throw it or what to do with it. He started out with it was a basic elementary knowledge of this is how you throw a changeup, and the more I got to thinking about it is that the idea of off-speed pitches is that some players and coaches will just throw off-speed pitches just because they think that, well, I haven't thrown one in a while, that should work. Or I want to be able to fool a batter, and maybe I should try to spin something up there or try to change speeds. And throwing off-speed pitches is an art form. And it's something that you have to practice. You just can't wing it. It's something you have to really put a system into place first before anything can happen. And my student this morning was talking about, or I was mentioning to him about, whether or not when he throws his changeup, how frequently he should be throwing his changeup and when he should be throwing, and he had no idea. And so I basically said, with the changeup, with whatever changeup grip that you have, whether it be the straight changeup, should it be the circle changeup, should it be the split change, should it be the Vulcan change, the pitchfork change, and there are many different flavors and ideas of how to throw these pitches. I said, whatever is comfortable for you should be the pitch that you want to grab and you want to throw and you want to be consistent with. Here at the Academy, we tend to use thanks, Dad, I appreciate that. My dad mentions never throw a changeup to a bad hitter, and we'll get to that here in a second, so I appreciate your feedback there. But when we're throwing the straight changeup, we want to take the label on the ball, put your thumb right underneath the label, and relax your fingers right up on top of it. You're mainly going to want to throw with the ball with your thumb, with your fingers just nice and relaxed. The grip of the straight changeup is very similar to the circle change. I'm trying to find a good position to show everything here, but the circle change and the circle change and the straight change tend to be very similar, but with the circle change, the ball generally tends to stay out in the fingertips. There tends to be a lot of wrist rolling, and a lot of younger players really can't get that idea. And one of the things about the changeup is that you want to be comfortable with this, you want to be assertive with it, and you want to have a lot of repetitions underneath your belt before you start to actually throw this into games. A lot of times players stop throwing the changeup, start practicing the changeup because they're just not comfortable in throwing it. They know that it doesn't work, but they don't throw it in games because it doesn't work, and they don't practice it because it doesn't work. But yet it doesn't work because they're not practicing it. It doesn't work because they're not throwing it in games. So if pitchers can begin throwing the changeup as frequently as possible. I wish I had some of this information 20 years ago, believe me. But if you can throw this pitch as consistently as possible on a frequent basis, you're going to be able to get an understanding and get a better feel for what it is that you're trying to do. And I don't just mean in the bullpen. The bullpen is the last place you want to be practicing this pitch. You want to be throwing this pitch on the sidelines. You want to be throwing this pitch with mom or dad in the front yard with your buddies. Anytime you have an opportunity to grab the changeup and then to practice throwing it, you do that. You get hundreds, if not thousands, of more repetitions in over the course of a season or over the course of a year than you would if you just go to the bullpen. And in Little League, most pitchers only throw about a 20-pitch bullpen. They throw 4 or 5 changeups. So if you say, you know what, I'm just going to take the changeup and I'm going to throw it for the next 20 minutes. That way you get the opportunity to become comfortable. You have the opportunity to experiment and see what it's like to throw it ball and down, throw it left, to throw it right, throw it up. And it's just something that you want to be able to really have a full grasp of in terms of the grip as well as the concept of what you want to do. Now, when should you throw changeups? And this is the one thing that most players have no idea, mainly because coaches are calling every pitch these days. Whether you're in Little League, whether you're in high school, every pitch is called. And so pitchers they're not able to think for themselves anymore. And so we're able to help educate them and give them the sense of, well, if I'm throwing a changeup to, let's say, if I'm in Little League, to the top 4 or top 5 hitters, if I fall behind in the count, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1, I want to throw changeups right down the middle of the plate. Why? Because, well, if I'm throwing a changeup 1-0 after I just threw a fastball and I missed for a ball, perhaps I'm catching batters a little off balance. The purpose of the changeup, the purpose of any of our off-speed pitches is to keep hitters off balance. And the purpose of pitching in general is to keep hitters off balance. So why should I throw a changeup? Why should I throw off-speed pitches only when it's the most opportune time to throw off-speed pitches? You don't necessarily want to be throwing changeups and curveballs on every 0-1 count, on every 0-2 count. But if you expand the thought process a little bit and think, well, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1. Most hitters are thinking fastballs. Most hitters are thinking, let me just sit back, wait for something to come right down the middle of the plate. So if you can throw a changeup, which is 10 to 15 miles an hour slower than your fastball, down the middle of the plate, you're going to catch the better hitters off balance. Earlier, my dad chimed in and said, never throw a changeup to a bad hitter. And the point being made there is, well, if you're throwing to batters 6, 7, 8, and 9 who can't really hit the fastball all that well, why would you want to slow this pitch down anywhere from 5 to 15 miles an hour and let them catch up to it? So throwing to finding the better hitters in terms of the lineup of batters 1 through 5 or even 1 through 6 and finding their weak spots, making sure that you can throw with confidence, but also say, you know what, I just missed with that fastball on a 1-0 count or on a 2-0 count. Let me throw a changeup right down the middle. Let me calm myself. Let me have a better sense of attack. And if they hit it, this pitch, if it's thrown well, is 10 miles an hour slower, so they're not going to hit it well. They're going to be out in front of it. They're likely to hit a weak ground ball or maybe a bloop pop fly and not really get some good wood on the ball. So the ability to have a good approach and a good mindset towards how you're going to be throwing this, when you're going to be throwing this is important. Let's say that you want to throw this, a changeup in the middle of the count, and say first pitch. Why would you throw a changeup first pitch? Well, if you've got guys swinging at first pitch fastballs constantly throughout the game, throwing a changeup and splitting the plate in half, either left half, right half, and thinking either in or out, can get batters even more off balance, as well as if you were to think 1-1 and 2-2 counts as well. If you were to throw it ahead in the count, 0-1, 0-2, 1-2, ideally, you don't want to be throwing this pitch down the middle or even near the middle of the plate. You want to be thinking on the outer third. If anything, maybe even think off the plate. If this is a pitch that you want batters to swing and miss, so don't even think about throwing this pitch remotely close to the limits of home plate. Stretch the limits of the plate a little bit and think either way in or way off the plate, so that if players do have an opportunity to hit it, they're not going to hit it. They're going to hit it off the end of the bat, and they may get jammed. But it's something that you don't want to be laying a changeup right down the middle of the plate on an 0-2 count, because that's what everyone's expecting. So the last thing about the changeup is we get a lot of players in here wanting to throw or coming in throwing the the circle change, and because it moves a little bit more. What we want to do is be able to throw a changeup to offset our fastball. You have curveballs, you have cut fastballs to offset breaking pitches. And at the beginning levels, if you want to really become confident, you really want to become comfortable with the changeup, practice throwing it straight first before you really want to make it go crooked. The ability to throw a straight changeup to offset your straight fastball is a key component towards then later on in your career making sure that you're able to actually turn it over or do some fanciful things that Steven Strasburg and some of the professional pitchers are doing. So moving on to the cut fastball. The cut fastball is basically a faster slider. This is a pitch in which we take a normal with the seam, two-seam fastball, and we offset our fingers, as a lefty, on the right side of the seams. For right-handed players, you're going to take a two-seam fastball, offset it on the left side of the seams. Your thumb basically is going to be directly underneath your index finger, and you can either have it on that front seam there or on the back seam there. And by being able to do this, what we do is we basically are trying to throw a spiral with the baseball. And the traditional slider grips usually tend to overload on the horseshoe, either on one side or another, and create that spiral rotation as well. But the three main important aspects to any cut fastball or slider is the revolutions per minute, or the revolutions per second, if you want to think of it that way, the velocity of the pitch, and the axis of the pitch. And when you put those into basically a triangle, and you realize that if I don't have the correct amount of rotation on a breaking pitch, it's not going to actually break. If I don't have the right velocity on a breaking pitch, I'm either going to get a larger breaking pitch or a smaller breaking pitch. If the axis isn't correct, meaning that just like I would throw a spiral with the football, if that axis isn't pointing between home plate and the pitching rubber, I'm not going to get consistent break. And so if the RPMs are low, but the velocity is high and the axis is there, then I'm going to get basically a fastball that maybe moves just a little bit. If the RPMs are up, but the velocity is either high or low, the velocity is low and the RPMs are up, I'm going to get a faster breaking pitch. If the RPMs are up and the velocity is high, then I'm really going to be getting a much faster, quicker, shorter breaking pitch that's moving diagonal for righties across the strike zone from right to left, or for lefties from left to right. And if the axis is not perfectly from pitcher to catcher, you're not going to get that sweeping breaking pitch kind of moving diagonal through the zone. A lot of times players will get more fastball rotation, in which case this pitch will maybe just slightly break ever so just a little bit. And then sometimes we get the opposite, in which case the ball is rotating too much like a curveball. We get a lot of players throwing cut fastballs and sliders and trying to throw a curveball, and it turns out that these pitches look very similar in shape and speed. And so throwing these two pitches to whether it be the same batter or to the same team, it's really not going to be as beneficial. So you really want to look out for mixing cutters and sliders in with curveballs. Which brings me to my next pitch, is the curveball. The one, albeit most famous pitch of all in baseball. While the changeup is typically the most feared pitch that any batter will face, the curveball is the one that most pitchers usually end up throwing the worst, but getting the most production out of. But at the same time, can be a very poor pitch to be thrown. Can be a pitch that pitchers throw a lot and make the most mistakes on and get hit with the most. So with the curveball, we choose to teach what we call the tomahawk curveball. And what you do is you take your middle finger, you wrap it around the bottom part of the horseshoe there. Your thumb is going to sit on the back left portion of the ball. And when I start to teach it, I like to take that index finger off the ball, so that now as I'm going to throw it, what's going to happen is that ball's going to tumble right out of the top of my hand and create more of a 12-to-6 rotation. If you're not getting 12-to-6 rotation on a curveball, what's going to happen is it's going to act more like a slider, it's going to act more like a cutter and move more right to left. A curveball, we want to move from top to bottom, 12 to 6, and we want to drop it down on home plate. If there's any one pitch that you really want to make that be-all, end-all pitch to devastate hitters, make it the curveball. You want that pitch to tumble, you want it to drop it down right at the catcher's feet so that as you throw it, you throw that pitch straight. You get nice clean rotation to it. The batters actually think that they're looking at a four-seam fastball just for a brief second, and then as they start to swing over the ball because this pitch is tumbling forwards and then breaking down after they swing over it. But the keys to throwing a curveball well is not to overdo it. All right, everyone always wants to think that maybe throwing a faster, more explosive curveball is the way to go. In which case, sure, it works for Steven Strasburg, it works for Matt Harvey and all those guys in the big leagues. But if you're only throwing 60 or 70 or 80 miles an hour, you're not going to have a very explosive curveball. What you can have is you can have a curveball that's spinning very rapidly. You can create a sharper breaking pitch by making sure that you have that true 12 to 6 rotation. And you want to make sure that this pitch is anywhere maybe between 12 and 15 miles an hour slower from your fastball. So if we have the fastball at 1 speed, we're going to have our cut fastballs or sliders in between, whether it be a 5 to 7 or 7 to 9 range. You want to have your changeups in that 10 to 15 or even 10 to 12 mile an hour range, and then you have your curveballs in a 12 to 15 or a 10 to 15 mile an hour range. Ultimately, if you are throwing all 4 pitches, throwing all 4 pitches well, you want to be having 4 pitches at 4 different speeds. You don't want to be having a fastball and a changeup and have your changeup only be 5 to 8 miles an hour slower than your fastball, and then have 2 breaking pitches that are 7 to 9 miles an hour slower than your fastball. So almost all of your off-speed pitches are clumped into one type of velocity. And regardless of how effective those pitches are or how much they break, a cutter and a curveball and a changeup, all moving at the same speed, all almost look very similar. So you want to watch out and make sure that when you're looking at the radar gun, you're not trying to look at that radar gun to see how fast you're throwing the ball, but to see how slow that you're throwing the ball. You want to make sure that you've got 4 different pitches at 4 different speeds, and the curveball should be the slowest. I would say your changeup should be that next fastest pitch. Then your cutter, you can work to have that explosive slider or that explosive cutter that everyone talks about. Most major league cutters generally tend to be only about 1 to 3 miles an hour slower, but they also can be in that 5 to 7 or even 7 to 9. It really depends on who's throwing it and what it is they're trying to do with the pitch. Some guys just want a fastball with a little bit of movement, which is considered a cutter. Some guys want a faster slider, which breaks a lot more than just a fastball, but breaks sharply and rapidly at the end. Then you have your slider, which is almost more of a curveball, but then breaks more diagonally. And then, of course, you have your 12 to 6 spinning curveball. So I want to thank everyone for watching and listening in today. Again, my name is Jeff Pinkman, and I'd like to welcome everyone in who has not been with us before. But please check us out on our website at pinkmanbaseball.com. You can watch other videos that we've done, kind of comparison clips and instructional videos at our YouTube channel at youtube.com/pinkmanbaseball. But follow us on Twitter at pinkmanbaseball and Instagram and Facebook. So next week we'll probably do a little bit more on the hitting side of things. We actually did some hitting 2 weeks ago, and we had a question about how to hit the ball opposite field and how to directionalize where you're swinging the bat. So perhaps we'll get into some tee work and some demonstration next week. So if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at info@pinkman.us and look forward to hearing any questions or comments, and please continue to tap that screen for us to give us some of those hearts. We appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. Take care.